This is lesson 17 of A Witch's Primer Revisited, and today is all about color magic. I have a whole course on color magic, which I have not yet released. I expect that course should be out fairly soon. I have some downloadable handouts for A Witch's Primer, and you may want to download those. If you're not registered for A Witch's Primer, it's a free course. All you do is go to arielgatoga.com/AWP. arielgatoga.com/AWP. There's no charge at all, but that does give you access to the few downloads that are available to you. And there are some correspondences that might be helpful for you, especially in regards to colors and planets. The most common way to employ color in magic is through candle magic. It's important to understand that candle magic is not the only way to practice color magic. And it's essential for those of us who might not be able to use candles for various reasons to learn other ways to employ color in our magic. Black is often used for protection, banishing. It can represent negative energy and cursing. It can be used to curse, but also to break curses and bad habits, etc. White is an all-purpose color. If you don't have any colored candles, you can always use white in place of any color. It represents by itself purity, serenity, peace, truth. Gray tends to be used for shielding, neutralizing, and self-defense. Red represents passion, sex, bravery, energy, lust, strength, and willpower. Yellow represents focus, intelligence, logic, mental clarity, and ideas. Green represents prosperity, money, earth magic, healing, harmony, balance. Teal, which is halfway between green and blue, represents sophistication, tranquility, healing, imagination, and wisdom. Blue represents healing, calmness, tranquility, creativity, inspiration, and also depression, the blues. Purple represents power, psychic abilities, divination, third eye, intuition, guidance, but also prosperity, justice, royalty, and wealth. Pink can represent forgiveness, friendship, romance, self-love, happiness, and harmony. Orange represents success, attraction, uplifting, thoughtfulness, joy. Brown represents stability, decision-making, practicality, and manifestation. Gold is the masculine principle, or the god. It represents the sun, wealth, success. Silver represents the feminine principle, the goddess, lunar, and it can also represent childbirth and motherhood. So those aren't definitive, and anything that color means to you is what's most important. So if a certain color brings a certain response to you, then that's really what it means to you. Each day of the week is ruled by a different planet, and each planet rules a different color or family of colors. Sunday is the sun, gold and orange. Monday is the moon, white and silver. Tuesday is Mars, red, crimson. Wednesday is Mercury, yellow, sometimes lavender. Thursday is Jupiter, usually royal blue and purple. Friday is Venus, greens, especially teal and turquoise, as well as pink and coral. Let's say you're casting a money spell. What should you use? Some people might say, well, let's work with Jupiter in purples and things like that, because Jupiter represents wealth. While others say the sun. Use the sun and gold, because the sun represents success. But other people say, well, wait a minute, money is green, which would be Venus and sometimes Saturn, depending on the shade of green. So there's all kinds of different ways you can go. It's just you need to figure it out from your point of view, how you're orienting your spell. And that's why the craft is an art. There's choices that you make. Now, for instance, with Jupiter tends to work better for expanding on something that's already there. If you want to use a Jupiter energy and purples for your money spell, that's a good way to go if you're wanting to grow something that's there. But if you're already broke, that might not be the best way to go. In fact, I've heard many stories of people that have gone to working Jupiter spells when they're completely broke, and it seemed like it expanded on their poverty rather than expanding their wealth, in which case you might want to work with the sun or with Venus. The other thing you want to think about when you're choosing colors for a candle spell is how many candles. Do you just want one candle, or do you want a series of candles on your altar? Sometimes you'll want one candle that represents you, in which case you want maybe your sun sign. Let's say you're in Aries, you might use a red candle for yourself, or you might just use a white candle to represent yourself on the altar. And then you might surround that candle that represents you with a color or several colors of other candles that represent you being surrounded by a particular energy. How do you choose how many candles to work with? There's a lot of different ways you can go about that. If you want to use more than one candle, if you're not working with numerological correspondences, like with the Kabbalah or other systems of numerology, a good rule of thumb is that odd numbers represent change and even numbers represent stasis. Now, that's not always the case. Like I said, if you're working with a particular numerological system or with a Kabbalistic system, that won't necessarily hold true. But if you're not, and you're just going for multiple candles and you don't know how many to use, even numbers are a good thing to use if you want to keep everything the same, or if you want to stop something, if you want something not to grow. Whereas if you're wanting something to change, odd numbers are better. Think about it. If you add two odd numbers together, they become an even number. But if you add two even numbers together, they stay even. So it's just a simple rule of thumb if you don't have any other available information on numbers. For Kabbalistic correspondences, all of the Kabbalistic planetary correspondences start with the number 3. So 3 would be Saturn, 4 would be Jupiter, 5 would be Mars, 6 would be the Sun, 7 Venus, 8 Mercury, 9 Moon, and 10 planetary Earth or manifestation. So you could use those if you wanted to, or a different system of numerology. Or you could chuck the idea of numerology completely and just create a pattern on your altar that is pleasing to you. You might put the candles in a particular configuration, say at each point of a star, to give you a particular energy that you want to work with. So you can have a very simple setup for your candles. You could have just a single candle that represents your desire, and that's very powerful. There's nothing more or less powerful about using a single candle than using multiple candles. It's just how you want to build your spell. Sometimes we'll put candles around other things, other objects in our spell work. Let's say we're working with a puppet. A puppet might be a doll that you're making out of clay or cloth. And so let's say you had a doll to represent you, and you decided that that doll was colored green to represent healing for you, or maybe purple to represent power or wealth, or brown to represent stability and practicality, depending on your spell. And then you surround that doll with a particular number of small candles in one or various colors that represent something to you. You're making a statement on your altar based upon what your desire is. So that statement really needs to come from you. You can read through candle burning books and spell books and things to get the idea about how to do things. And sometimes there's certain spells that have a lot of ancestral or Akashic energy because they've been worked so many times that sometimes you just want to do the spell the way it is in the book. That's fine. But my favorite way to do spells is to craft them according to a statement that I'm trying to make to my deep mind. So all of what's going on my altar is a microcosm of the result that I want to get. Making a statement with your candles is a wonderful way to do that. Sometimes you might want to make a talisman. I have a bunch of different courses in how to make talismans to represent your desire. And then you can take that candle and burn it on top of the talisman to so-called charge the talisman. And that's just a way for you to meditate and see what you want to accomplish. While that candle's burning, the vibration of that color is very apparent in your mind. So you've got those visual cues there, that color vibration plus that talisman that you're working with. Maybe you're working with a charm bag. So you take a piece of cloth colored according to your desire and fill it with things, put things inside of it that represent your desire, maybe some herbs. So you can just get Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs and look at what are some of the common herbs that represent your desire. And you could put an odd number of things in there. You could put some herbs, maybe you put a stone, maybe you put a petition in there where you write your will and you fold that up and you stick that in there. Or maybe you have a planetary square. I have a free booklet on the angelic squares. Those are planetary squares. And you can put a planetary square in there and roll it up. All kinds of stuff you could put in there. Pieces of metal that represent the planet or the idea of what you want. And this just takes time to become more and more aware of what different things correspond to. And that's just a lifetime learning. But as you do learn that, you can incorporate different things so that you can put them in like that charm bag. And let's say you had an odd number of things in the charm bag. You can gather up the corners of the fabric and tie it off with some ribbon to turn it into the bag. And then you place that at the base of the candle of the color of your desire. You might want to take a nail or some other sharp implement and inscribe in the side of the candle either your desire, if there's enough room, or a symbol for your desire, if there's not a lot of room. Just a plain symbol and just inscribe it into the wax. Most of us usually like to anoint our candles. Now, you can buy occult oils to do this. There are all kinds of them available commercially. You can buy money draw oil and black cat oil and all kinds of different magical formulas. Some of them are great, some of them are questionable, but whatever you like, you can use those. But you can also just take some plain vegetable oil, like almond oil or something like that, and put it in a bottle that you can put a stopper in, and then also add to that oil a little pinch of salt and shake it up. And you'll notice that the salt never dissolves. It always stays on the bottom. That can be your anointing oil. And you can take that oil and you can anoint your candles. You can anoint anything you want with it. You can anoint yourself. You can anoint your chakra points. It brings power and blessing. The way you anoint your candles is you take your candle after you've inscribed something in it, or if you don't want to inscribe anything in it, that's fine. But do the inscribing first. And then the last thing that you're going to do to the candle before you light it is anoint it. You just take a little bit of that oil on your finger and you start in the center of the candle on its side and go all the way up to the wick. And then you start back in the center again and then anoint it all the way down to the base. And you can do the base, going to the base first and then up if you want, or you can go up first and then to the base. It represents as above, so below. So I usually go up first and then down, but it's really not that big of a deal. Just make sure that your candle holder is nice and sturdy. And as a general rule, when we're working with candle magic, we like to let the candle burn down and out all by itself when we're done with the spell. We don't want to reuse that candle for another spell. We want it to burn down and out by itself. Now, you may be working a multiple day spell, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So if you are, then you'll extinguish the candle and put it away, and you'll bring it out and light it again the next day and extinguish it and put it away, and then bring it out and light it again the next day, for however many days that you're working. You'll want that candle to burn down and out by itself. If you have multiple candles, the same goes with all of those. It's important when you do this to remember fire safety, because burning down your house is not a magical operation. You don't want that, and I've seen it happen before because people were careless with their candles. One thing you can do is just always be in the room while you're doing that burn down. Just always be in the room with it. I mean, that's what you should do. But an added protection for that is you could stick that candle inside of a large bowl that has a little bit of water in it that's coming up to the middle of the candle holder. And that way, if for some reason the candle did tip over, it would put itself out into the water. Always being very careful when you're doing candles. How do you determine how many days to do your spell? You could use an odd number of days, just arbitrarily. I'm going to do 3 days. I'm going to do 5 days. I'm going to do 7 days. You can do however many days that is the number of a planet that you're working with. You could do an entire waxing cycle or an entire waning cycle. If you felt like this was a big deal and that you really needed to work a long time on this, you could do an entire waxing moon cycle from new moon to full moon. Every night you're going to do something. Or an entire waning moon cycle from the full moon right before the dark moon. That's up to you. There's not necessarily a more or less powerful way to do it. Sometimes a one and done is the most powerful thing because you're telling your deep mind, this is it, we did it, nothing to worry about. Another way to do things is every single day until I get a click, until I get a sense that it's done. A lot of times I'll just continue my spell once a day until I get a sense. I really feel comfortable. I really feel like this is going to happen. This is cast, I'm done. If you can't burn candles, you can still work color magic. You don't need candles. The colors that you choose to wear are so important. That can be everything. You just bless your garment and you wear that and you feel like that garment is drawing to you whatever it is that you desire. It's through your garment that thought form comes. Or maybe you have different color scarves that you use, or you change the color of altar cloth depending on what you're doing. I used to use placemats. I would get little placemats in different colors, just plain placemats. So instead of like having a big altar cloth, I would just change out the placemat depending on what I was working on my altar. And that color was something that I could just visualize because it was right there. You can, when you're working color magic, work your visualization so that your whole aura is pulsating with the color that you're working with. Remember how we worked on building thought forms? This is a wonderful way to employ color magic. Building that thought form, we started off by charging it with that witch light, and then you change the color to whatever color of your spell, to a green thought form, or to a purple thought form, or maybe it's a green with gold flecks thought form. It's your thought form. You do you. You do you. You can make a plain color talisman. I love this technique. It's so simple. You take a piece of paper and you write out what you want and you enclose it in a circle. So you draw a circle around what you want. And so you have, maybe I now have my rent paid. You draw a circle around that, you do it freehand, or you can use a compass or a jar or something like that. And then you take some sort of coloring medium, a crayon, a marker, whatever, and you just start coloring over the words. And you just color solid color all over those words. If it's a lighter color, you'll see the writing through. If it's a dark color, you won't see the writing anymore because you're coloring over it. Doesn't matter. You're just imbuing your desire with the color by coloring over it with that crayon or coloring over with that marker or that paint or whatever you're using. And then you just sit and you see that color moving through that desire, and you see that desire being fulfilled. And then you just hide that talisman away somewhere until you get what you want, and then you can rip it up and throw it away. It's that simple. And sometimes when it's that simple, people say, well, that can't be very powerful. I want something harder, but it's not necessarily the case. The simpler the spell, the more powerful and effective the spell is oftentimes the basic rule. That's another great way to employ color magic. What to do with all of the remnants? We call them remnants. That's the witch dew. That's what I used to call it. The incense ashes, the wax drippings, the everything, right? So if there's a talisman involved, you put the talisman away. Some talismans you want to carry with you. Some talismans you just hide away. Depends on what you're doing. If it's a poppet, you'll want to wrap that up in possibly the color of cloth according to your desire, or just a plain white cloth, and you hide it away until what you've accomplished is there, and then you'll disassemble it or you'll tear up the talisman. So you put all that stuff away first, but then what do you do with the candle wax? What do you do with the incense ashes? What do you do with that water or whatever you've got on your altar? There's all kinds of ways you can deal with that. The common way is just to bury it. But not everything is good for the garden, right? So make sure that you find out what the most responsible way to dispose of refuse is, depending on what you're using. So you have to do a little research. I find personally that once everything's done, I don't care about the remnants. I'm not as superstitious about it as a lot of witches are. I just throw it in the trash or throw it in the recycle or wherever it's supposed to go. That's not where my thought form is. My thought form isn't in those ashes. My thought form isn't in that wax. My thought form is alive and well, either out doing something for me, or it's being housed in a talisman, being housed in a charm bag, being housed in a poppet, wherever I've placed it. So I don't really care to make a big ceremony about the wax and all of that. But if it's important to you, you can bury it in your garden. They used to put things like in running streams and stuff like that, but I just don't feel comfortable putting refuse of any kind in a running stream. I usually dispose of the remnants like I would any kind of garbage, because that's not where the magic is. The magic is in what I created, not in the waste product of the spell. If you want to add essential oils to your anointing oil, you can do that. Just be really careful that you don't put so much essential oil in the anointing oil that it burns the skin. It should be a very subtle fragrance. You can make oils for yourself. You can make money draw oils. You can make success oils. You can make banishing oils. I used to do a lot of that, but I just got so sick of having little bottles everywhere. I don't want people knowing what I do. I like to keep my craft private, and having a bunch of occult oils and a lot of occult incenses and things like that is just another thing for me to take care of. So that's why I just use one anointing oil. That's it. I don't have a bunch of little oils. If I'm incorporating fragrance, it's usually a spray perfume, and I have just a small collection of commercial perfumes. I have a rose, I have a verbena, I have some eau de cologne. I have a lily of the valley. See, because for me, I do everything with and I'm not saying you should do it this way, but I'll just share with you how I work with perfumes. I work so much with the planets. That's my main focus when I'm doing practical magic, that for me, I have a bottle of jasmine perfume that I've had for years and years. And I'll probably never use the whole thing because I don't do lunar rituals every single day. But so when I'm working with the moon, I use that jasmine perfume and I spray it in the air, or I spray it on my talisman or whatever I'm doing, or I spray it on myself. For Mars, I'll use either geranium, or I really like honeysuckle for Mars, just a floral perfume that I get from perfume.com. For Mercury, lily of the valley is great for Mercury. Also lavender. For Jupiter, lilac is usually my go-to for Jupiter. So I use a lilac perfume. But any purple, you could also use lavender. Lavender is easily shared by Jupiter and Mercury. For Venus, I usually use verbena or rose. You can use musk. For Saturn, a linden flower perfume or patchouli. For the Sun, I usually will use some sort of sandalwood perfume or orange blossom or neroli. Those are usually what I go for the Sun. So I've over the years invested in a bottle of perfume sacred to each planet. So I do have those, but that's it. I don't have to keep buying occult oils and stuff like that. And with me, since my all-purpose fragrances that I use are verbena and eau de cologne, such as 4711, I don't need any other perfume. I can use those for everything. I could just use verbena for everything, or just eau de cologne for everything if I want to perfume things. So those are all purpose. I like the specific perfumes though, because they do really help to focus my mind on that particular energy. I don't burn incense indoors anymore. I used to really be into it. I just don't anymore. But you can use incense on your altar. Now, what I use on my altar to bring incense into the mix is I use an oil burner. I also have an electric incense burner, and that's more like a vaporizer. It heats the incense material up so that you get a vapor of it, but it doesn't actually turn it to smoke like when you're using incense charcoal. If you want to burn candles, but you can't burn candles, you can use LED candles. You can. I've had people really ridicule me for that, but it works. It really works, especially if you can't burn candles, but you like the idea of candles. You can. Most of those LED candles are hard to find in color, so you'll just use the white, and then you can incorporate color on your altar in another way. Now, you can't burn it down until it goes out because those LED candles last forever. But what you can do when you're done with your spell is leave the LED candle lit for another hour at least to simulate the burn down, and then you can turn it off. So instead of burning your candle down and out, if you're using an LED, just leave it on for another hour or longer and then turn it off. So that's just an option for you if you want to use candles, but you can't. But you can do it any way you want. The most important part of magic, including color magic, is what you do with your mind. So you want to be able to see what you want in a relaxed state of mind, and then create that feeling of that color surrounding the image of what you want. And when that image is being imbued by that color, the deep mind accepts it as being true. And so that thought form has a lot more intensity because you've used the power of color, whether it's through pure visualization, whether it's through burning a candle, whether it's through a garment that you're wearing, an altar cloth, the color of flowers that are on your altar, or any other way that you choose to employ that color. I hope that was interesting for you, and we will have our last lesson next week, so I can't wait to see you then. Until next time, blessed be.